Hi, and welcome to another episode of Feature Fridays. And today we are joined by Mariush Minkov. Mariush, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, I'm Mariusz and I'm a Senior Product Manager at VMware, responsible for VMware Cloud Director Availability. I've been driving the product roadmap for last 1 year and something, and I'm really excited to be with you today.
All right, well, thanks for joining us today. My name, for people who don't know, Guy Bartram. I'm Product Marketing Manager for Cloud Director Suite of Products, which obviously includes Cloud Director Availability, our DRaaS solution. So today we're going to talk about some of the service monitoring aspects of a disaster recovery as a service solution. We've had a few service providers, ask us how they should be best provisioning their services, tiering them, looking at events, monitoring them, and billing for the services to their customers. So I just want to dive into some of those aspects with you, Mariusz. Now, 4.0 brought in the capability with service profiles, SLA profiles. And I think that was when we really were able to now provide a concrete mechanism for a service provider to be able to tier their replications for their customers, right?
Yes, definitely. And this is actually a major step from our previous model, where the different tiers have been applied per organization. Now we are enabling providers to have differently priced replications within the same organization. And this is achieved by assigning more than one SLA profile.
Yeah, awesome. And in 4.1, which has just come out, we also have enhanced monitoring and event management, right?
Yes, definitely. Actually, with 4.0, we introduced some monitoring capabilities for providers, and with 4.1, we are enhancing them to the tenants. This is like one of the first major improvement, and the second major improvement is around the channels that we are using for notifications. So practically, we have implemented integration with the email configurations that exist in VCD. So we are sending emails directly from VCDA, and this is applicable both to tenants and to providers.
Awesome. So in this way, then we've got a way of delivering a service in a sustainable manner using the SLA profiles, and we've also now got a way of metering events for the service using 4.0, which was syslog and VCD events. And now in 4.1 is email for replication events to tenants and various other events available for providers, right?
Yes, yes, definitely. Actually, as a quick and fast rule, I would recommend for providers to use the syslog capabilities. They are much more powerful and enable more detailed insights and more options for filtering what to be notified when and how. While for notifications to the end customers, I would recommend to just use the email notifications, because this is like the quickest and easiest and fastest way to have something. Yeah. And it solves the really serious problems of making the end customers aware if something with their applications is not as expected.
Yeah, so they don't have to be looking at the system 24/7. They just get something popping into their email, which is fantastic.
Yeah, as much as I hate to say it, it looks like our most of the end customers are not loving to spend 24 hours in our great UI.
Yeah, never a truer word from a product manager. Okay, that's great. So let's have a quick look then at an example of the SLA profiles. Then let's dive into a quick overview of the monitoring capabilities with those different channels. Then let's look at the other side of it is, of course, you're not just charging for a DR as a service function in the product. You're also charging for the end target infrastructure, so compute, storage, that type of thing. So let's have a look at how we can look at that and the type of things that are important for us to look at as a service provider. How do we charge? Is there capability to oversubscribe? When do we oversubscribe? Is it cloud to cloud or on-prem to cloud? And what can we see in the API and the UI? So API obviously for integrated to our billing systems if we wish to, UI for just operational views perhaps and checking a bill. We're not going to cover the tenant app today, but we will do a separate session on this. Today we just want to just look at, Cloud Director Availability, what's native in the product today. So why don't we start by diving into just a brief overview of the service profiles and what they would look like for an example tenant.
Okay, great. Do you see my screen?
I do.
With the main dashboard? Perfect.
Yep.
Okay, great. So practically the SLA profiles are their configuration is available only for providers, and the way to configure the system by default ships with 3 SLA profiles that are pre-created. These are the gold, silver, and bronze with these values that we see here.
Right.
These are default profiles that are there just provided there just as an example, so that it is easier and faster for providers to start assigning them. It is fully possible to have them deleted or modified or done changed to whatever way the provider likes. So what we have in each profile is essentially a profile consists of replication settings that are predefined. So what we have here is RPO, the retention policies, which consists of a number of instances that we want to keep, and the total duration over which we are keeping the instances. I'm actually going to open one SLA profile to look at it. So we have these familiar sliders here.
Yeah.
Whether QuiaSync is enabled or not, whether compression is enabled or not, our recommendation is to have the QuiaSync disabled and the compression enabled. And then there is another setting which makes it possible to delay the initial sync start time. This is primarily for the purposes of avoiding high amount of data traffic during peak hours, and it is mostly used for initial configurations or when large sets of VMs are configured at once.
Yep. Okay.
So once the SLA profile has been configured, the next step is to assign it to an organization. And actually, once when we hit the assign button, we see the full list of organizations that exist in our connected VCD. So I have 6 organizations in my example. We have thought, of course, about the large setups where you can filter by an organization, and in order to get to filter the results and have less. And once you do the assignment, we are also showing what are the profiles that are currently assigned. Once you do the assignment, it means that the tenant can start configuring replications based on this profile. There is another setting worth mentioning here, whether the tenant can overwrite the settings in the SLA profile. This is something which is controlled by provider policies. But in the scenario when we are doing billing based on SLA profiles, I would rather recommend not to use this at all.
Okay. Yep.
Once an SLA profile has been assigned and when an organization has started using it, then we can no longer change its settings.
Okay.
So if we want to migrate to change the settings of a specific SLA profile, like if we want to redefine what gold means, in my case, I already have 5 orgs that have access to this profile, and there are 3 replications configured to it. So I cannot change the gold. I need to copy it by cloning, doing the modification I want, and then I can migrate the replications from the gold to gold, new gold plus, or whatever way I have created this one.
So in a provider's situation, then when you've got customers using these SLA profiles, then really the advice is to kind of do your homework beforehand and make sure you have SLA profiles set up correctly, because realistically, you want to keep the billing as simple as possible and have those assigned to SKUs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is true, but it is also possible that the profile may change. or it can turn out that that we want to reconsider some of the decisions that we made, for example, around quasing or network compression. But still, in this case, it will be more like around migrating to another policy, to another SLA profile, rather than changing this one.
Yep.
Practically, the way we made this, the reason we made this design decision is because there is a whole lot of complexity sitting behind changing a profile where there are applications using it. So then we need to make a decision what to do with these replications. Do we want to notify the tenants and so on? It is not only complex to implement, but it is also complex to explain, to communicate, and to use.
So now I've got in my my tenant org, if I'm a tenant now, I can create a replication and I can select the gold, silver, bronze. If I've assigned all three to my org, I can set those based on the criticality of that VM. So if it's a high criticality VM, business critical, then I can assign it the gold service.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you've taken a lot of the decision making and all of the finer detail that you would have to train the tenant in, basically, taken that away from them, made it nice and simple. So you could just have your SLA profiles as business critical, mission critical, non-critical, if you wanted to,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So once we've got the SLA profiles being used by tenants, how do we see from a consumption perspective who's consuming what and what volume of SLA profile?
Yes, I will actually start answering this one from the main dashboard.
Okay.
Practically, what we see here is like a general overview about of the system.
Mm-hmm.
How many incoming VMs we have, how many outgoing, what is the total number of on-prem and cloud sites. And actually, what is so nice about VCDA is that it enables the provider to manage absolutely everything from the single provider console. So what we have is the incoming replications view. For example, it is showing all incoming replications that are coming from all sites, and there are also filtering options that enable to filter by site.
Mm-hmm.
And by site, I mean here is that this could be either a cloud site or a tenant site. As you can see, we have three different icons that indicate different site types. So these two are connected cloud sites. These three are connected on-premise sites, and this one is our own site, because we
Right.
are also supporting replication to self.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I can take to have a view about all the replications incoming from tenant 2, from their on-premise data center, and I see what is their current configuration. And this is pretty much the easiest way to get a quick glimpse of what is happening. Let me switch to the New York site. So these are all replications that are coming from the New York site. But when I hit the topology, I see additional details related to the source organization and source org VDC. So we see that only one org is replicating to our site at the moment. But these columns are fully filterable again. So
Yeah.
even if we had hundreds of replications with tens of different orgs, it would be very easy to filter and see exactly what our end customer is seeing.
Okay. And can we see what SLA profiles they're consuming in this type of view as well?
Absolutely. These preset views are modifiables, and you can easily change the number of available columns. You can just need to select the SLA profile and add it here. And
Oh,
it is now available both in the topology view and also in the status view.
brilliant.
And
Okay.
Yes, the good. Another very interesting piece of information is around the instances, which is showing us information about the instances that we are keeping. So we see, for example, that this file server has been configured to keep 14 instances over 4 weeks, and if we select the replication, we are seeing this additional panel where we can actually have a look of each of these instances, and we see the time it took and the size for the data transfer that happened with each of these instances.
Okay.
Practically, yeah. Any
Sorry,
questions?
yeah, sorry. Again, can I see the SLA profile that's being used on there? And is that only available in, oh, okay, so that was actually a VM we're looking at there, right? Okay, that makes sense.
It's available. It's available in any of the views, so you can just add it in any of the views you want. So we
Right.
have a gold SLA profile for the file server application. And
And just,
yep, yep.
sorry, and these views can be manually exported if they wanted to be, I assume?
Well, instead of exporting, I would suggest to use the API.
Right.
We have a public API that gives as an output all the information that we see in these columns.
Okay, yeah,
This also includes the resources where we actually see the amount of resources that will be provisioned after successful failover of this replication. So this is the source configuration, and it is the requirement for a successful failover and not a measurement of the current consumption. So if we are interested in the current storage consumption, it is available in the instances view as the consumed storage.
got it. So that's CentOS
Yeah.
VM there that's using 5.14 gig of storage. That's
Mhm.
actual consumed storage, so that's the replicated storage. But if you then need to recover that VM or do a test failover, you would be looking at the actual disk size being populated
Yeah, which
with
we
the
can see here.
so you would need the 10 gig plus the 5 gig for the actual failover, and then remove the 5 gig, and you'd just be having a 10 gig disk with 5 gig usable.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
this is the case. In order to fail over successfully this VM, we need to have 10 gigs available in our VCD storage quota, and the current consumption of this replication, uh, like the storage consumed for keeping the replica data, is the number that is available as consumed storage. Let me quickly find it. So here it is. Yeah, so we see that consumed storage may be the same or may be very different from the disk capacity.
okay, so this is an important point. So the way that Cloud Director Availability works is we replicate constantly on the RPO schedule, and
Mhm.
we replicate to an independent disk. When you do a failover, then what we're going to actually do is take from the VCD storage policy that's in place for that org VDC the disk capacity resource, and we're going to say, right, that disk capacity resource, that 10 gig, is now assigned
Mhm.
to that VM. I've got this independent disk which is being replicated to, which is 5 gig. So once I've
Mhm.
got the 10 gig disk ready, I'm going to replicate that 5 gig into there, do that final sync, and then I'm going to delete the independent disk. So now you've got a recovered VM of 10 gig, and that 5 gig additional, which was the independent disk, has been removed.
Yes.
Yeah. So in that case, then what service providers need to be aware of is when they're failing over or doing test failovers of customers' VMs, they need to have the disk capacity and the consumed storage available on their target site for that initial failover. Um, so the advice here
That
would be don't fail over hundreds of VMs at the same time, right?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And but we still need to keep in mind that at the time of failover, the replications have already been done, and whatever space have been used by the replica data, it has already been used. So the remaining, the requirement for the available storage is exactly matching the disk capacity that is going to be provisioned.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
And here's an interesting one. Just going to that file server. So it's saying that there's 10.2 gig consumed, but the disk is only 10. What happens when you fail that one over?
Uh,
It's the
which
first
one
one.
is
The
first
first
one?
one. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have 10 gigabytes of disk capacity and 1002 consumed storage. Yeah, this is one of the rare cases when these two are matching. But yeah, so this indicates that this disk is pretty full.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a situation that service providers need to keep an eye on, or customers do, that there is enough disk capacity, obviously, to do that failover.
Yes, yes. So if I want to fail over this machine only, I will need 10 gigabytes. But if I want to fail over these 5 simultaneously, then I will need to sum these up, which means 56.
Hmm.
So it may happen that I may not have 56 available right now. And if this is the case, I will probably need to fail over them one by one in order to do the failover, free the consumed storage from the independent disk, and then the next one. And if we should look at what is our best strategy here, we should probably pick to decide to fail over as soon as possible this one, because it is consuming really a lot of storage for replica data. Wow, the disk capacity is only 10.
Is that gonna? So I'm that that consumed storage. Then that's all of the replica data.
Yeah, because we are apparently having multiple instances. If we scroll down here, we have quite a lot of instances, and apparently they are not so small. So this
Got
is
it.
an example where the consumed storage is much more than the source disk capacity.
But it doesn't mean there's not going to be enough source disk capacity. That means basically when you do the failover, it will take one of those images from the consumed storage
Yeah.
and fail it over into that 10 gig. Right. Okay.
Yes.
So then the advice here is to kind of fail over sequentially because you're going to need this capacity and consume storage to do a failover.
Yes.
So make sure you have enough storage, a storage overhead for that consumed storage independent disk to be used and then deleted, and do the biggest ones first.
Yes. Yes. Definitely, this is the case. Of course, if there is enough disk capacity to do the biggest ones, but this one is actually not so big in terms of capacity that will be provisioned on failover.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
So it will actually once we fail over this one, we will end up having more available capacity because we will delete a pretty big independent disk.
And are we doing any sort of checking at the back end that there's enough capacity when you set up a replication job, that there's enough
Oh
capacity
yeah,
in the target
yeah.
VDC? Yeah.
Yes, actually we do, and this is something that we are doing before starting the initial sync. When you do initial configuration of the workload, one of the as one of the first steps is we are creating the independent disk, and since we don't know yet how much of the source disk has been actually used, we are creating the independent disk with the size equivalent to the disk capacity. So each of these, yeah. So actually, if we want to protect a huge VM, a disk with a huge hard disk, but that has used a tiny bit of it during the initial configuration, we will check that there is enough capacity at the destination to accommodate the entire disk and provision it successfully. And then we will do the initial sync, and after the initial sync is complete, we are going to sync to shrink the independent disk to match the size of the used part of the disk.
So
This way
essentially
we are, yeah.
yeah, so essentially that additional storage capacity that was unused in the disk allocation is then released.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's important. So for initial replications, when you set up a replication, if you've got a 10 gig disk there, but only 5 gig is being consumed, when you
You
set up
won't be
that,
able, yeah.
well, no, sorry, in
Ah,
terms of the target org, VCDA will create a 10 gig disk and then start so then the check will be like, yeah, there's 10 gig available for you to run this replication to set up this job. And then when you click go, it will start replicating that 5.14 gig over, and then it will
yeah.
shrink down the 10 gig to only 5.14 gig.
Yes, and this is actually part of our precautions that when you create replications, you will create them to a destination environment where you have good enough chances to do failover.
Yeah,
Because if there is not, if even during replication creation, we see that there is not enough space to accommodate the entire disk capacity, then apparently, once we start placing the replica data and the additional data about every Delta instance, then it will make the situation even worse. So this way, we are trying to like kind of to flash an early warning that this storage policy cannot accommodate this replication successfully.
so for service providers then looking at designing of a service, the storage piece is a little bit ambiguous to do preemptive or to base solely on your charging, because you're going to need quite a lot of storage to do the failover of the independent disk and the disk capacity. Um, so you actually want to charge for the service, i.e. the tier of service, the gold, silver, bronze, at a certain rate. And then you want to charge in addition for storage, whatever the consumed capacity is separately.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. This is what I see almost all providers do.
Okay.
And actually, this amount of consumed storage, this is something that we are really have made an effort to expose it in the system to be in a very transparent way. So this is only one of the ways to look at it. The other would be to check once we have this replication would be to check the disk usage. So and we can see how this disk usage, this consumption has changed over time.
Yeah.
So if you ask how come this one is consuming 39 gigabytes, then we can exact check the history then by day
Yeah.
and even hour by hour to a certain point back in time and see what has happened.
Now, let's just talk about the use cases here. So if I've got on-prem to cloud,
Mhm.
i.e. I've got a customer's premise and they're replicating to cloud, um, or I've got 100 customer premises or 1,000 hopefully with 1,000 different replications from each customer. Awesome, huge customers.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of compute and storage at the cloud end, I need to make sure basically I've got enough disk capacity. So looking at this column, I'm going to call it the column name, disk capacity,
Mhm.
which would have been checked when you set up the replications, that's fine, to allow for that VM to be able to run in my cloud. I need to maintain a certain amount of overhead for
Yeah.
independent disks. That basically should be probably appropriate or equal to an average site consume storage, because it's not likely you're going to have multiple tenants in multiple sites all failing over at once. You'll have one site maybe do a whole site failover test. So taking an average or a bit more would be a good idea for then ensuring that you have enough storage to start up disks, assign those disks, but also to have the independent disk do that final sync as well. Now, in the cloud-to-cloud situation, this is a little bit different. A little bit different because if you have a failover in a cloud-to-cloud situation, you're talking about, a large portion of the workloads potentially going down. Like if you have a UPS failure, you have a aircon failure or fire or something like that, or someone drills through the cable outside, the usual stuff. That means then you could potentially have hundreds or thousands of VMs all wanting to fail over,
Mm-hmm.
which definitely means then you need enough compute, enough memory to start the machines, but importantly, you need enough disk capacity and you need the consume storage at the same time.
True.
Yeah, so you don't need like an average of one customer, you need both.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's I guess some of the advice for our service providers that perhaps they want to consider.
Yes, and an easy way to check what is the total amount of resources protected in the system would be to check the required resources report and switch to the provider view, which gives the summary based on per PVDC.
So yeah, and one thing we were kind of discussing a little bit beforehand is disk capacity required. That's your capacity, but that's not plus your independent disks, is it? That's just your
Yes,
capacity.
that's actually this number here represents the total of the values in these columns here.
Yeah. So if it's cloud to cloud, you need to add on the consume storage number as well. Okay.
Yes, you.
And in that report, in the required resources report, you show compute variables as well. So one of the things I think that we're looking at here is when we're looking at number of CPU or the amount of RAM, that is the assigned CPU and assigned RAM to that workload, not necessarily what the reservation is in your
Yes,
VDC. Yeah.
yes, definitely. We are not looking at reservations. We are here. What we are reporting is just the virtual hardware configuration. So if the VM has been configured with 2 CPUs at the source, these are going to be provisioned as 2 virtual CPUs in the destination org VDC, and this is what they will accumulate to. What is the actual reservation and the actual usage of the actual CPU resource? It is something that we are not counting here.
Yeah, you'd have to look into VCD, into the org VDC itself. But
Yes,
that's
actually, we are thinking of different ideas how to fetch information from VCD and correlate it here, or maybe provide these numbers available as part of VCD itself. I would be really interested to hear any feedback, ideas, or suggestions from partners. So I already have a few great ones that will hopefully uh, come to life soon. But
mhm, cool.
it's really something that's good to understand what else we could do here.
Yeah, sure. And I think this is where, providers have got the option then to start sweating the assets a bit more. Being able to run two machines with, actually only the compute and memory that, maybe one machine requires. Um, okay, so let's finish up then by looking at what the API gives us, because I think we've now seen, the SLA tiering, how you can see the SLAs in the UI. We've seen and talked about some of the aspects around consumption and being aware of that, and how you can see the required resources like we are looking at now. What about the API? What can the API give us?
Well, the favorite way for me to browse the API is through the Open API client. It
Nice.
actually integrates with my current session, so I can
Okay.
directly start running API calls from here. And practically one of the most important APIs, which is powering this incoming replication screen, is that both the incoming and outgoing actually is the VM Replications API endpoint. It is available here, and it really allows us to do a lot of stuff and get a lot of helpful information. So a simple GET request would give us exactly the information that is needed to build these UI screens. And here we can see all the details about the replication that we have in the system, like information about the destination, information about the SLA profiles, about the retention policy that is configured, about the storage profile, pretty much everything. Yep.
Oh, no, I was just going to say this is excellent. So, um, from a point of view of understanding which tenant has which SLA profiles in use, the volume of VMs per SLA profile will be a matter of just getting this array back and working through the array programmatically to do a count. And then obviously you can also see the consumed and allocated or required disk resources as well.
Yes, definitely. And um, practically, this is information that is changing frequently. So my advice is if anyone is building an integration based on this API code, be just to call it periodically and then aggregate the data based on their favorite formula. So I've heard most of the providers preferring to charge based on the maximum consumed storage. Others prefer to charge based on the average. I've heard a few willing to do the 95th percentile.
Mm-hmm.
That's also an option. So once you have all the raw data, you can implement any kind of binning crew and change it anytime. So that's really the power of doing such integrations.
And for those interested in the 95th percentile, I think that metric was added in, maybe not the last, but the one before release of tenant app.
Yeah, the tenant app can also do it, and actually, tenant app also has most of these metrics. So practically, you can get the summary of it from the tenant app as well. And something else interesting is that this API is giving you the current state. So if you call this one today, you see what is the current situation. But if you didn't call it a week ago, you won't know what was the situation a week ago. But if you still need to get the historical metrics, then we have different APIs that are giving you the history of the disk usage and the history of the network traffic. So this is this API owner disk usage, and when you, oops, something, I guess I didn't call it properly. Yeah, I probably need to do some inputs. It requires the, let's see what will happen. Something didn't happen. I guess
I get that. So you get a CSV output perhaps of the traffic.
It will actually give the data that we are using to build these graphs here.
Yeah.
That's the simple, easy, and visual way to to illustrate it. But this is a list of data samples that are aggregated by day, hour, or 5 minutes. And depending on the aggregation level, there is a different maximum period that you are getting the history. So if you are interested about daily aggregation, you are getting the last 60 days, which is more than enough to recover the state from last week.
Yeah, sure.
So if you are only interested in getting the storage consumption, you are also fully okay to just call this API once a month, and you will get the history of the storage per org. And it is also possible to get the storage per replication.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, I believe in the API that I was trying to show. You are going to get detailed information about every replication, and it is essentially the same output that is also available as a CSV file when you click the export daily disk usage data.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. It's going to be a large volume of data.
Yeah, it's a pretty large one, but it's It's fairly easy to manipulate it in Excel and get some good statistics about the disk consumption of different replications and how it varies over time. So in case one needs to dig into and make an analysis of the consumption history of a specific tenant org, then it's more probably the best way to do it.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, well, I think this is probably a nice place to stop today's session then. And next time we'll look at a tenant app and look into how tenant app takes these details and automates a lot of this stuff for you. So if you're looking at the billing side of things, tenant app is definitely something to look at, which we'll look at later on. But for now, that's, I think, a really good overview of the type of things to consider, the type of capabilities the UI and API provides in this kind of service design, metering, and monitoring of the service. Mariusz, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to have you on, and look forward to the next one.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure for me as well, and see you next time.
Cheers.
Bye.